Iceland's volcanic crisis is intensifying, and what is happening right now on the Reykjanes Peninsula is unlike anything this planet has seen in 800 years. 7 eruptions in just 3 years. Streets cracked open overnight. An entire town evacuated. Not once, but again and again and again. And the lava? It is not stopping. For nearly 8 centuries, this stretch of volcanic rock sat completely silent, peaceful, safe enough to build homes, businesses, and a whole community on top of it. Then, in 2021, the ground split open, and it has been splitting ever since. But here is what is truly terrifying. Scientists are not calling this a disaster that Iceland needs to recover from. They are calling it a permanent transformation. The peninsula is physically changing shape. New land is rising from the ocean. And the models that were supposed to predict when this ends, they are failing. So the question is no longer, when will the eruptions stop? The question is, what do you do when the volcano beneath your home never goes back to sleep? To understand why what is happening in Iceland right now is so alarming, you need to understand what Iceland actually is. This is not just a cold island sitting in the North Atlantic. Iceland is one of the most geologically violent places on Earth. It sits directly on top of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the massive underwater crack where the North American and Eurasian tectonic plates are slowly pulling apart. Every single day, those two plates drift a little further from each other. And all that pulling, all that pressure, all that heat building up from deep inside the Earth, it has to go somewhere. In Iceland, it goes up. The country has up to 130 volcanoes. More than 30 are still active today. Eruptions are not news in Iceland. They are a fact of life, written into the national identity, the same way tornadoes are written into the American Midwest, or monsoons are written into Southeast Asia. Icelanders do not fear volcanoes the way outsiders do. They live beside them, work beside them, and have built an entire civilization on top of them. Now zoom in on the southwestern corner of the island, a 50-mile stretch of jagged volcanic rock jutting out into the Atlantic. This is the Reykjanes Peninsula. 30,000 people call it home. Iceland's only international airport sits on its edge. The geothermal power plants that heat and light the capital city, Reykjavik, are buried in its ground. The world-famous Blue Lagoon, the country's most visited tourist attraction, sits directly on top of it. And for nearly 800 years, Reykjanes was quiet, geologically still, safe enough that generations of Icelanders built their lives there without a second thought. Scientists had a word for what the peninsula was doing during those 8 centuries: resting. But in the world of volcanoes, resting never means finished. What makes Reykjanes different from Iceland's other volcanic zones is not just its location, it is the type of system buried beneath it. Multiple interconnected magma chambers sit below the surface, linked together like a network of underground pressure vessels. When one fills, the pressure does not simply release and disappear. It shifts, it spreads, it finds another path. In March 2021, after 800 years of silence, the ground on the Reykjanes Peninsula cracked open for the first time in living memory. Scientists, journalists, and curious tourists hiked out to watch the glow on the horizon. Many of them smiled. They thought they were watching a once-in-a-lifetime event. They had no idea they were watching the beginning of something far bigger and far longer than anyone was prepared for. It started with wonder. When the first eruption broke through the Reykjanes Peninsula in March 2021, Iceland did not panic. The fissure that opened near Fagradalsfjall was slow, almost gentle by volcanic standards. Lava oozed from a crack in the hillside in glowing rivers of orange and red, lighting up the night sky like something out of a nature documentary. Scientists called it a tourist eruption. People drove out on weekends to watch from the ridgeline. Children took photos. It was extraordinary, but it felt manageable, contained. A geological spectacle that Iceland could show the world and then move on from. That was the first mistake. In August 2022, the ground opened again. A second eruption at Muradalir, just miles from the first. Then a third at Litli Hrutur in 2023. Each time, scientists updated their language slightly. From isolated event to recurring activity. From recurring activity to reawakening. The eruptions were not random. They were connected. Pulses from the same awakening system, arriving faster each time. Then, everything changed. The fourth eruption shifted to a different magma system entirely, Svartsengi, sitting directly beneath the town of Grindavik. In November 2023, fissures cracked open inside the town itself. Roads split apart, houses tilted. The 3,800 residents of Grindavík were given hours to grab what they could carry and leave. Some took photo albums, some took medications, some left with almost nothing, believing they would be back within days. 3 more eruptions followed, each one faster than the last, each one with less warning. Lava breached the defensive barriers built to protect the town. Eruption intervals that once stretched across months shrank to weeks. The volumes of lava being released grew larger with every new event. 7 eruptions in 3 years. The numbers alone are staggering. But what truly alarmed scientists was not the count. It was the pattern. Because this was not a volcano releasing pressure and settling back down. This was a system building momentum, accelerating in ways the models had not predicted, on a timeline that nobody had prepared for, and nobody could say with confidence where that momentum ends. To understand why scientists are so alarmed, you need to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface. Deep below the Reykjanes Peninsula, magma is pooling inside underground chambers. As it accumulates, the pressure builds. The ground above it physically rises, swelling upward by centimeters per day, like a blister forming on the skin of the Earth. GPS sensors operated by the Icelandic Meteorological Office track this inflation in real time, measuring every millimeter of movement. When the pressure finally becomes too great, the ground ruptures and an eruption begins. Then the cycle resets. The chamber empties, the ground deflates, and the magma starts building again. What is terrifying about Reykjanes is that this cycle is accelerating. The time between eruptions is shrinking. The ground is refilling faster than it did before. Scientists describe it as a system that is not releasing pressure and recovering. It is releasing pressure and then immediately reloading. And now there is a deeper disagreement forming in the scientific community. One group of researchers believes this is an intense but temporary active period. The system is burning through accumulated magma that built up over centuries of quiet. Eventually, they argue, the supply will exhaust itself and the peninsula will return to dormancy. But another group is not convinced. They point to Iceland's geological record, which shows that Reykjanes does not experience single eruptions followed by long rests. It experiences volcanic eras, periods of intense, sustained activity lasting decades or even centuries, separated by long silences. The last era ended 800 years ago. The evidence, they argue, suggests a new one has begun. Satellite thermal imaging is adding weight to the more alarming interpretation. Heat signatures beneath the peninsula are not shrinking between eruptions. They are growing. Magma appears to be accumulating at shallower depths with each new cycle, meaning future eruptions could reach the surface faster and with less warning than anything seen so far. International volcanologists studying similar long-duration systems, from Italy's Campi Flegrei to Hawaii's Kilauea, warn that once a volcanic system of this scale enters an active era, the realistic question is never whether it will erupt again, it is only how soon. The ground is keeping score, and right now, the score is not moving in humanity's favor. Grindavik is not a famous town. It never was. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where families have worked the same harbor for 3 and 4 generations, where the fishing boats go out before dawn and the smell of the ocean is as familiar as anything in the world. About 3,800 people called it home. A tight community built around a working harbor, the kind of town that does not make international headlines. The kind of town that is simply, quietly, a place where people live their lives. Then, the ground opened beneath it. In November 2023, fissures cracked through the streets of Grindavik without warning. Not on a distant hillside, not on some uninhabited stretch of lava field, in the streets. Residents woke to the sound of the earth splitting apart beneath their feet. Mandatory evacuation orders came within hours. Families packed what they could reach quickly: medications, documents, children's toys, family photos, and drove out in the dark, headlights cutting through ash-colored air, looking back at the homes they had spent lifetimes building. Most of them believed they would be back within days. What followed was something harder to endure than a single catastrophe. It was a siege. Residents were allowed to return briefly, only to be evacuated again as the next eruption built pressure beneath the surface. Then again. Then again. Each return brought fresh uncertainty. Each evacuation took something that did not come back: a sense of safety, a belief that the worst was over, the quiet confidence that home was a place that would hold. Some residents refused to give up entirely. Fishermen returned between evacuations to check on their boats, the same instinct that drove Robert Chen back to his dairy farm in 1973, the refusal to abandon the thing that defines you. Others made the harder decision quietly, loading moving trucks and not looking back. The psychological toll of a disaster without an ending point is different from any other kind of loss. There is no single moment to grieve, no clear line between before and after, just an ongoing, grinding uncertainty that wears people down in ways that a single catastrophic event, as terrible as that would be, simply does not. For thousands of Grindavik residents, the volcano did not take everything at once. It took everything slowly, piece by piece, eruption by eruption. The eruptions on the Reykjanes Peninsula are not just destroying a town, they are threatening the infrastructure that keeps an entire country running. Start with the Svartsengi geothermal power plant. This single facility supplies electricity and hot water to roughly 30,000 homes, including much of Reykjavik's famous district heating system, the network of pipes that pumps naturally heated water directly into buildings across the capital, keeping them warm through Iceland's brutal winters without burning a single drop of oil or gas. Svartsengi is not just an energy source, it is a lifeline, and it sits within direct range of the lava flows that have been advancing and retreating across the peninsula since 2021. During multiple eruptions, lava came close enough to the plant that workers were evacuated and operations were suspended. The facility has survived so far, but each new eruption tests that survival again. Then there is the Blue Lagoon, Iceland's most visited tourist attraction, built directly on a lava field fed by the same geothermal system, drawing over 1 million visitors per year and generating hundreds of millions in revenue. It has been forced to close repeatedly since the eruptions began, its striking pale blue waters sitting empty, while ash drifted across the surface and lava glowed on the horizon. Partial damage has already been sustained. The brand that Iceland spent decades building around its otherworldly volcanic landscape is now being undermined by the very forces that created it. Keflavik International Airport adds another layer of vulnerability. Located on the peninsula's edge, it is Iceland's only major international gateway, the single point through which the vast majority of tourists, imports, and exports flow. A significant eruption shifting toward the airport's flight paths would not just inconvenience travelers, it would functionally isolate Iceland from the world. The economic ripple effects are already measurable. Tourism built on the promise of Iceland's volcanic beauty now has to compete with the reality of volcanic danger. Insurance costs for peninsula properties have risen sharply. Investment in the region has slowed. Iceland built its modern economy on the very geological forces that are now turning against it. The geothermal energy, the dramatic landscapes, the volcanic tourism, all of it traces back to the same restless ground beneath Reykjanes. That ground is no longer a resource. Right now, it is a threat. Iceland has been here before. In 1973, a volcano erupted on the island of Heimaey and threatened to bury a harbor that represented 3% of the entire country's economy. Faced with an impossible situation, Iceland did something that had never been done at scale anywhere in the world. It fought back. Workers pumped 1.9 billion gallons of seawater directly onto the advancing lava, cooling it into rock, building walls of hardened stone from the lava itself, slowing and eventually stopping the flow. It took 160 days, hundreds of workers, and an almost unreasonable refusal to accept defeat. But it worked. That spirit did not disappear. It is being called on again, right now. Since the Reykjanes eruptions began intensifying, Icelandic authorities have constructed massive earthen barriers across the peninsula, berms stretching hundreds of meters, built by heavy machinery working around the clock, racing to stay ahead of advancing lava. The scale of the effort is extraordinary. Bulldozers move millions of tons of earth. Engineers monitor lava flow speeds in real time, adjusting barrier positions as the terrain changes. Helicopters track the leading edge of each new flow from above, radioing coordinates to ground crews below. And it has worked, at least partially. During several eruptions, the berms successfully redirected lava away from the Svartsengi power plant, buying critical time for the facility to remain operational. That is not a small achievement. That is modern engineering holding the line against one of the most powerful natural forces on Earth. But the 1973 comparison only goes so far. At Heimaey, there was a single lava front advancing from a known location. Workers could target it, concentrate their resources, and measure progress in real time. On the Reykjanes Peninsula, the threat is fundamentally different. Fissures can open anywhere along a miles-long volcanic zone with very little warning. A berm built to protect against one eruption may face a completely different direction the next time. The defensive strategy that saved Heimaey was built for a fixed enemy. Reykjanes is not a fixed enemy. Engineers and scientists are now debating what a long-term defensive infrastructure for the entire peninsula would require, and whether such a thing is even possible. The answer, so far, is uncertain. Iceland knows how to fight a volcano. What it is still learning is how to fight one that never fully stops. Here is something that is easy to forget in the middle of a crisis. The lava is not only destroying, it is building. Every flow that crosses the Reykjanes Peninsula is adding new material to the landscape. Roads that existed 2 years ago are now buried under meters of solid rock. Neighborhoods that once held homes are now lava fields that will still be there 1,000 years from now. The coastline itself has extended outward in places where lava has reached the ocean, cooling into new land that did not exist before 2021. Iceland is physically larger today than it was when the first fissure opened at Fagradalsfjall. This is not a side note. It is the central truth of what is happening on Reykjanes. The peninsula is being permanently reshaped, not damaged and recoverable, not temporarily altered, permanently, geologically, irreversibly changed, in ways that will outlast every person alive today, and likely every person their grandchildren will ever know. To a geologist, this is not a crisis. It is Iceland doing what Iceland has always done. The entire landmass, every mountain, every valley, every harbor and coastline was built by exactly this process over millions of years. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge has been pushing new material to the surface since long before the first human being walked the Earth. What feels like catastrophe at a human timescale is, At a geological timescale, simply Tuesday. But humans do not live on geological timescales. They live on the scale of a lifetime, a generation, a community. And on that scale, what is happening on Reykjanes is a genuine and unresolved crisis with no clear endpoint in sight. Scientists studying Iceland's geological record have identified previous volcanic eras on the Reykjanes Peninsula, lasting anywhere from several decades to several centuries. If the current activity follows historical patterns, the eruptions could continue well into the lifetimes of children being born today. The peninsula that emerges on the other side of this era will be a different place than the one that existed in 2020. Reykjanes sits on the mid-Atlantic ridge, the same system running the full length of the Atlantic Ocean floor, driving the slow drift of continents, reshaping the planet on a scale no human force can match or meaningfully resist. What is happening in Iceland is not an interruption of the natural order. It is the natural order, expressing itself with complete indifference to everything built on top of it. Iceland has always lived with volcanoes. That is not a poetic observation. It is a practical, daily, generational reality that shapes everything about how this country thinks, builds, and survives. The volcanoes are not a backdrop to Icelandic life. They are part of its foundation, literally and culturally. You do not settle a land of 130 volcanoes and 30 active ones without developing a certain relationship with fire beneath your feet. That relationship has been tested before. In 1973, Jaime burned, and Iceland fought back with seawater and stubbornness and won. The harbor was saved. The community returned. The island that nearly disappeared became a symbol of what human determination can accomplish against geological odds. Iceland took that lesson and held on to it. But the Reykjanes crisis is asking a harder question than Jaime ever did. Jaime was a battle with a beginning, a middle, and an end. One volcano, one harbor, 160 days, one victory. Reykjanes is something different. It is not a battle. It is a new condition, a permanent feature of life on the peninsula for the foreseeable future, measured not in days or months, but in decades, possibly longer. The berms will be built and rebuilt. The power plant will be defended again and again. The evacuation orders will come, and residents will face the same impossible calculation each time: stay or go, fight or release, hold on or let go. There is no single heroic moment coming that resolves this. There is only the ongoing, grinding work of a society learning to live alongside a geological force that operates on a timescale it cannot control and a scale it cannot match. Other nations watching Iceland right now should not feel distant from what they are seeing. Volcanic systems, fault lines, rising seas, and shifting climates do not recognize borders. The specific threat changes. The fundamental question does not. How do you protect what you have built when the ground beneath it stops cooperating? Iceland does not have a final answer yet. What it has is something almost as valuable: the willingness to keep showing up, keep building barriers, keep pumping water, keep fighting for the harbor even when the harbor is on fire. The volcano will erupt again. The ground will rise and split and flow. And Iceland will be there when it does. That has always been the deal. It still is.